Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this UCD and IBM Colloquium on Digital Surgery and Innovation in Ireland. I'm Niall Hardy. I'm a surgical trainee currently undertaking a PhD in the area of artificial intelligence, computer vision, and cancer diagnosis. So as a trainee surgeon, this is a topic that I have a lot of interest in. As you'll see, we have a lot of excellent speakers from different areas of healthcare, academia, and industry, all here today with the goal of furthering discussion, innovation, and action in digital surgery in Ireland. I'd like to point out early on that we want the session to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to use the Q&A function on your screens and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can. To begin with, we have some short messages from Dr. Leo Varadkar, TD, Tánaiste and Minister for Trade, Enterprise and Employment, Professor Orla Feely, Vice-President for Research in UCD, and Dr. Ruoyi Zhou, Director of IBM Research in Ireland.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to open this colloquium on advancing the national digital surgery ecosystem in Ireland. And I'd like to thank the organisers at IBM Research Ireland and the UCD research teams for the invitation to be here. Speaking as a doctor and also as Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, I'm excited to learn more about the emerging research, clinical and commercialisation opportunities that lie ahead. As you know, IBM and UCD are part of a consortium on the future of colorectal cancer diagnosis and treatment, which is a collaboration with the Royal College of Surgeons, Mater Hospital and Dtif. In 2018, with my colleague Heather Humphreys, I announced $6 million in funding for the project under the Dtif, or Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund. That day we all met in person in the RCSI in York Street. It feels like so long ago now, and I wish we could meet again in person today, but that's not possible yet. Nonetheless, since then, despite the impact of COVID-19, the consortium has achieved much, and I know it wants to develop a leadership role for Ireland in the area of digital surgery and build coalitions among industry, hospitals, clinicians and academia. It's really rewarding to see how the project has developed and to see how the collaboration has inspired further collaborations as well. The purpose of the DTIF is to drive collaboration between Ireland's world-class research base and industry, and to facilitate enterprises to compete directly for funding for the development of disruptive and innovative technologies on a commercial basis. These technologies should alter markets, alter the way business operates, involve new products, or the emergence of new business models. As you know, the medtech sector has been a major beneficiary of the DTIF. Of the 72 projects funded under the 3 calls to date, 40 have a health dimension, and these have been awarded over €155 million in total. The total level of funding, €235 million over the 3 calls, is an indication of the government's commitment to fund high quality projects that will deliver truly disruptive innovations in Ireland. 8 of the 40 projects have a strong digital component. They address diverse aspects like using artificial intelligence to identify early stage breast cancer and prostate cancer, and utilising biophotonics and advanced algorithms to enable clinicians to diagnose fetal hypoxemia. I believe this level of success reflects the strength of the medtech and life sciences sectors in Ireland. We have an impressive mix of indigenous and multinational companies that are leaders in their field, and when combined with our world-class research base, they continually push the boundaries of what is possible. The government's economic recovery plan, launched earlier this month, seeks to nurture the kind of collaboration that we see here today. We recognise that Ireland must adapt to the future of greater digitalisation and automation. Many of today's school children will be employed in jobs and industries that don't exist yet, and technology will eliminate or transform many existing occupations. COVID-19 has accelerated the move to a digital future. We've seen how quickly individuals and companies can adapt to change when we have to. The pandemic has brought much suffering, but it also presents opportunities, and we should seize them now. The Economic Recovery Plan sets out a new phase of investment and policies for industry. Under the plan, 6 projects worth €295 million will help accelerate and expand digital reforms and transformation. One of these projects will be led by my own department, an €85 million programme to drive the digital transformation of businesses and the establishment of European digital innovation hubs here in Ireland. The government will also support AI adoption across our enterprise base as part of the long-awaited National Artificial Intelligence Strategy. AI has huge potential in the area of healthcare, from improving patient experiences to providing more accurate interventions for patients. Governments around the world are making use of AI in the development of vaccines and outbreak prediction and modelling, automated contact tracing, intelligent supply chains, and space mapping for social distancing. And that's just for starters. The Economic Recovery Plan also makes commitments and investments to prepare for the future economy, to make education, research and innovation central to our future investment decisions, to ensure that our higher education system provides a pipeline of highly skilled graduates, and to recommit to the vision of Ireland being a global innovation leader. Our approach is centred on adopting a more sustainable path to economic growth and recognises that enterprises are more likely to progress and succeed if they're part of a supportive ecosystem. SMEs especially have a crucial role in such systems. They've shown an ability to embrace disruptive innovation through collaboration on industrial research. This is a central tenet of the DTIF and demonstrates the partnership approach essential for a thriving digital surgery ecosystem. The audience today is a cross-section of SMEs and multinationals, academics and medical professionals, a perfect mix for exploring issues and generating ideas. I'll finish by extending my appreciation to everyone at UCD Research and IBM Ireland Research for organising today's events. The range of speakers and panellists will certainly provide you with a lot of food for thought. But as attendees, you have an even more important role to play. So please share your knowledge and your ideas about how we can make an Irish digital surgery ecosystem a reality. This is an opportunity for you to shape the future direction of this field and assist in making Ireland a leader in such technologies. So I wish you all a really successful event, and I look forward to seeing you in person next time. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's event on behalf of UCD. As ever, it's a shame that we can't be meeting on our lovely campus, but we hope that the date when we can do that again is now not too far away. So in UCD, we seek to deliver excellent research and innovation, drawing on all our expertise across disciplines, working with partners to make a real difference to the world. And the area of digital surgery is a great example of where this can work to dramatic effect. We see that we can pull together the expertise in universities in the area of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, working with our wonderful hospital colleagues, with industry partners from SMEs to large multinationals, supported by government with these very agile funding instruments such as the DTIF, and with the broader support of government and its agencies. So all that group of people coming together, and informed, of course, as ever by international best practice, we think that we can make a real difference to the world. So I hope that today's event advances this conversation and points us a way forward to really igniting the Irish ecosystem in digital surgery. I want to thank a number of people in particular for bringing us to this point and whose leadership will be vital in taking us forward. First of all, Professor Ronan Cahill, whose lab I had the pleasure to visit late last year. And when you see in the lab just what can now be delivered by bringing the best of digital technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence to bear on the problems experienced by surgeons, it's extraordinary. And I think that the opportunity here is vast and is on our doorstep for us to realise. So very, very happy to be supporting Ronan and to continue to see his success. Another UCD academic who's been instrumental in leading this area for us is Professor Patricia Mcguire, who leads our Institute for Discovery with a particular interest in AI for healthcare. And I know you'll be hearing later about many of the really, really exciting developments in this space across UCD. And finally, as ever, I want to thank our wonderful partners in IBM, with whom we are once again organising today's event. It is great to work with partners who understand and share your mission and your ambitions, where we have complementary skills and expertise that together we can bring to bear on one of the most interesting problems that now confronts us. So thank you all for being here today. I wish you every success, and I hope that the day leads us to a new point in our national journey in relation to digital surgery and comes up with a way forward that will allow Ireland, allow UCD, allow all those involved today to really take an international lead in a space of enormous and transformative potential. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi, everyone. This is Ruoyi Zhou. I'm the Director of IBM Research Ireland. I'm delighted to welcome you to UCD and IBM Research Annual Colloquium. This joint effort started back in 2016. Over the last 5 years, we not only deepened, but also broadened our partnership in exciting and new emerging research areas that ranging from cognitive IoT to deep learning and quantum computing. So what you're about to see today is another emerging and exciting new area, digital surgery, which is truly multidisciplinary and also disruptive. We hope that today's colloquium will ignite a national digital surgery ecosystem in Ireland. So now, enjoy and have fun.
So I think those introductions serve to highlight the shared goal of establishing Ireland as a global leader in digital innovation, and leads on nicely to the first of the day's keynote speakers, Professor Silvana Peretta, a surgeon from IRCAD in Strasbourg, and she's going to give us her thoughts on the world of digital surgery.
Hello, everybody, and Rona, thank you very much for the kind invitation. Delighted to be here, even if it's only virtually, unfortunately, and also delighted to be giving a lecture with such a title, The World of Digital Surgery. I really believe that surgery moved away from the industrial era to the information age. We are all aware of that. And if we looked at the evolution of surgery, we do know that if we have a maximal imaging and data support, we can have high quality images and real-time information. We can increase the outcome of our surgery, increasing also the accuracy and the precision of what we do, doing tailored approaches, reducing the collateral trauma, and reducing potentially also the rate of complication. Surgery has evolved from the concept of the disease, the changes in the surgical technique, the changes in the technology, the changes in the environment in which we practice, and also the changes in the expectation that patients have towards the results and the quality. And we think about the evolution of surgery, we do know that, first of all, we can see better what we do because the images have evolved so much. We have high quality, high definition images. We have 4K. We have now the possibility of enhancing the lymph node dissection using ICG and a node identification technique, as Ronan has shown us very elegantly so often. We can also mix robotic surgery with high definition and high resolution images that can also assess the vascularization of our tissue. For instance, I'm an upper GI surgeon. This is incredibly important for us during esophagectomy to assess the quality of our transplant, gastric transplant, before pulling it up into the chest. So we can see beyond the tissue today. We can see the invisible. We have now software that can help us quantify and visualize the bowel perfusion real time in order to decrease potentially complication. We can use preoperative image and reconstruct a holomer of the patient in order to improve our access and better target the disease. And it also is an incredible teaching tool that can be used to teach not only anatomy but surgical strategy to our younger colleagues. This is especially interesting when we're mixing and matching techniques and specialty and competences during surgery, because we can plan a multitude of approaches to decrease the invasiveness of surgery. Of course, ideally, we should have a virtual reality environment in which the real images and the holomer of the patients are fused, which will allow us to precisely direct our tools in order to avoid structure that should be preserved and better planify our dissection, reducing the collateral damage to structure. We also have witnessed a change in the environment where we work. We work now in ORs that are hybrid because they include different kinds of technology, but also hybrid because they're a meeting point, they're a crossroad between different specialties: surgery, flexible endoscopy, interventional radiology. And this also contributed to create a lot of information, a lot of additional data, a lot of additional potential complications. Surgery really moved away from something that was really very simple, rather ineffective, we have to say, but relatively safe, to something that is very complex, effective, very effective even, but potentially dangerous, because there is a lot of technology-based, data-intensive softwares and technology in the OR, which can lead to medical errors. And if we look at the risk of having a problem, fatality per human activity, you see, in fact, that surgery and healthcare in general, and I say surgery because it concerns us most, is really high, ranking very high. Driving, which is also something that can lead to accidents, is as dangerous as going in for a doctor visit or to have a surgery performed, and definitely more riskier than mountain climbing, for instance. And this is also because physician and surgeon in particular are particularly bad in reporting complication and understanding complication, reporting outcomes. Quality of reporting and evaluation on outcomes is something that is only today becoming a science. And in fact, if we look at what happened to Codmont, which was a surgeon in Mass General that years ago was the first to propose an analysis and assessment of the results of what surgeons and physicians in general were doing back then. He was treated a little bit like a traitor, was fired from Mass General, and his theory on following the patient from the preoperative workup till the dismissal and even to the follow-up was not accepted at all. Today we moved away from this philosophy, and we want to report our data and our results in order to understand how can we improve the way we deliver care and have an impact on all the pathway and the circuit of care, and not only with surgery but also to all extended to all the interventional discipline, interventional radiology, gastroenterology, all other specialty. Data that regard the patients in the images that the patient took before the operation, intraoperative data from all the technology that we have and all the different people that have an impact on the patient, anesthesiologists, nurses, radiology technicians, and all also the strategy that can be put forward in order to prevent complication after the patient has exited the OR. A little bit like a control tower, a little bit what is done in aviation, we should be able to pull all data from the different machineries that we have in the OR in order to synchronize those data and really sense what's going on in the OR, extract the relevant information, and assist the surgeon, the team, and all the players within the OR, within this infrastructure, in order to deliver the best care and the safest care to the patient. This can be done by the identification of the phases of a particular operation. Here you see a sleeve gastrectomy being recorded, and then proceed step by step, addressing each each phase of the operation and teach the computer to learn what should be done and most of all what should not be done, not only in terms of anatomy or dissection, but also in terms of technical execution of a particular phase of the operation. This can be done for cholecystectomy, and the different steps of the operation can be assessed using an AI algorithm. And this is particularly important, in fact, because what we can do is to use a deep CVS model, critical view of safety model, in order to understand whether the dissection of the critical view of safety is done well or not, if the critical view is actually achieved or not. This is possible because the computer can segment and understand the anatomy very well if it's taught correctly. And we can achieve a very high satisfaction in terms of how the software and the deep model can classify the critical view of safety. And in fact, we not only can guide the surgeon towards the achievement of the critical view of safety, but what we will see in a second is also that the algorithm itself, the computer can understand whether the surgeon has performed a good dissection or not. And this is based on the analysis and marking and annotation of thousands of different videos, which then give a very interesting analysis of how well we perform. You know that cholecystectomy is a very well standardized procedure, which is judged relatively simple. But when you review the videos, not only from surgical residents, but also from attendings, you realize how rarely is the critical view of safety achieved. And here the software is capable of classifying a critical view of safety which was actually achieved and a critical view of safety which was not achieved. Of course, cases that are more difficult are prone to be those where this window was not achieved properly. This kind of philosophy and approach can also be applied to flexible endoscopy, and this is a very nice paper that is published from the team of the Mass General and Thomas Ward and Dan Hashimoto, applied to the POEM procedure, the per-oral endoscopic myotomy for achalasia. And here you see that the POEM procedure was analyzed, standardizing the different step of the procedure. And the different steps of the procedure were then analyzed for different level of difficulties. And you can clearly see that each procedure can leave fingerprints. Each operator has a different way of reacting to a particular anatomy, to a particularly difficult procedure. And you see that, for instance, the computer could understand immediately whether the dissection was particularly difficult, such as in patients who presented with a end-stage achalasia and a sigmoid esophagus. So this is very useful because predicting the length or one particular phase and step of the procedure could also predict the outcome or predict the potential complication or failure that the operator can encounter. The same concept can not only be applied to a procedure, but a whole surgical team performance, the surgical flow. And we can use a tracking and pose estimation in order to understand whether something is done smoothly, whether the ambience and the environment in the OR is correct or not, whether we can gain time, suppress some of the phases of the preparation of a procedure, and better standardize some task. This is all very exciting, definitely, but there are many obstacles and limitations to the idea of recording and analyzing all the data that we can gather from the OR, or even more from a hybrid OR, and from a surgical workflow, because of physician resistance, because of the limited quantity of data that are available for the analysis, mostly because of rules and regulation, which are different in each country and are very, very difficult to overcome or to deal with because of liability, privacy issue, and also because of culture. Because when we asked here at IRCAD at a survey that we have performed a few weeks ago, how surgeons felt about AI. Did they feel that AI will have an impact, positive or negative, on their job? Most of the surgeons that we interviewed said that yes, they believed that AI would have an impact for the better. But there were some resistance, and up to 16% of surgeons thought that AI could actually impact and change their job as a surgeon. But was most striking is that most of the people that were interviewed could not really define the fundamental concept of AI. So digital surgery and digital data science is extremely interesting, but most of the most of our peers don't really have a clear understanding of how to deal with it and what to do for surgical data science really to make an impact and make a difference in our job and in our everyday workflow. Thank you very much.
Okay, so pretty exciting stuff happening clinically, as you can see there. And to talk to us a little bit more about the technology side of things and what we can expect of technology in a digital world is Dr. Jeff Rogers. He's Global Leader, Cognitive Internet of Things for Healthcare in IBM. You're very welcome, Jeff.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Rogers, and I'm here to give you some background on, at least my perspective, on how technology is providing some opportunities for us in the field of medicine and healthcare, and where there's actually a need for collaboration and putting together what are effective models to help us achieve the innovations we need in healthcare. Okay, so I think that this recent crisis that has happened to us with the COVID pandemic is actually going to turn out to be something that is very helpful. So what I'm showing here are numbers from the US to try and make the point that when the COVID crisis initially hit us, and we took it hard initially, but this is showing March 1st when we declared a national emergency. You know, soon after that national emergency was declared, we began to basically close up shop. So the only care that was being provided, all elective surgeries were off. The only care that was being provided was either an emergency care or something that could easily switch to telemedicine. And so an example of that was behavioral support or mental health care, where counseling could be achieved by effectively doing telemedicine via a video conference. So that was an easy switch that was made, and that could continue more or less. But certainly for a while, we just basically tightened down to something that was emergency only. Over time, excuse me, that began to open up. But the fact that we made this big switch to telemedicine actually is sustained. And part of the reason that is sustained is because the government stepped in and actually provided two important things. Our Federal Communications Commission actually said, you know, we trust these communications, it's okay. And then our funding side actually said, what we call CMS, stepped in and said, you know what, we will pay for telemedicine and for people to actually check in on patients remotely, right? So that's a valid way to provide medicine. And so I wanted to show you a quick example where, you know, from about 10 years ago, where we did a couple of things that I thought were important that are relevant to today. And so one of them was rapid innovation. And the other part of it was the way it was structured. So in this case, you know, we had back when we were surging so many troops from NATO into Afghanistan, we had this challenge of we were seeing a lot of soldiers come back with mysterious injuries that were presenting like they had a concussion, right? So we were trying to understand what happened here. And, you know, there was a lot of debate on whether or not soldiers were getting hit in the head effectively, and that was what was leading to these injuries. But actually, from the physics side of it, you know that that's not quite right. It can't just be that you got a concussion on the battlefield when a bomb went off. That's not a concussion-like event. So what we did is we tried to get a sensor system out there that could define whether or not this is somebody hitting their head or they're getting exposed to other things like overpressure, which is what happens in a bomb. Is that the mechanism? We need to understand that before we can begin to help them. And so what I'm showing you here is what we actually did. And so what we did here was we took that challenge, and instead of trying to create a whole new research arm to look into what's the best way to do the sensors, what's the best way to do everything, we actually looked at, all right, what could we do today using existing electronics, existing off-the-shelf parts? And so that led to us, you know, I had sketched out the original drawing, and then 14 months later, we had that thing, we had tested it, and we had given it to a group of special operations operators who took it directly from the US to Afghanistan and tested it in the field. And their testing revealed the problem, by the way, that we were able to turn a new solution on it within a month. And then we delivered it to 50,000 soldiers throughout Afghanistan and tracked them for 2 years. And what I'm showing you here is, you know, all the things that went into that, including, you know, developing the sensor, developing the protocol, all the analysis, the imaging that was done, connecting those together to come up with a criteria for, if you got exposed to this much, you're fine. It can happen over and over again, it's all right. If you're above this threshold, you got a problem, you got to go see a doctor. And it turned out that the most important thing we did besides getting that data was just give the medics on the ground a green, yellow, red light based on these that let them say, hey, I got to worry about this person or not. It turned out to be a very valuable tool just for that purpose. And in the end, we got the data we needed. All right, so I want to use a different area to show how I think we can innovate in healthcare more effectively, right? So that area is actually the semiconductors, right? So I had made a mention that microsystems, there's been so much technological advance there, and we see how important those are, and how actually even in something like automotive, the innovation that's going to be happening over the next several years in automotive is not in building engines. It's in how you incorporate electronics into the cars, right? That's really where the innovation is coming. And so, you know, if you go back to the 1980s and you look at it, the blue line here is showing you coming out of the 70s into the 80s, the proportion, the market share that was from the US in semiconductors. And semiconductors are a huge area, right? We're all familiar that right now there's a crisis in manufacturing cars related to, again, the lack of semiconductors, right? And so what we were seeing in the US was we had done a lot of the innovation, we had the majority of the market share, and we were losing that. At the same time, Japan was really replacing us, right? And so as the market share began to switch over, we had recognized early on in the US that there was a problem. You know, we were losing out from the innovation point of view, right? And so how are we losing this? Well, we tried to address that challenge because companies grouped together in the semiconductor space, and they funded universities to kind of go work on the next big things. But that didn't really change it much, right? That changed it some, but that's this boundary here. And so we continued to lose market share. Then what happened was when we recognized, okay, look, we got to do something different here. The government partnered with industry and with universities. And what we did was we launched something called Semitech, where we took government level resources. So the government put in a lot more money. They helped make it not about a particular company's interest, but about a common set of interest amongst the companies, and then gave some guidance to universities, and that led to the International Roadmap on Semiconductors, and then provided to not just the guidance on what are the challenges we need addressed, but here's the funding to make it happen, and companies here, we're gonna have to share the IP out of this. And that actually made the difference. That was a really beneficial construction, and the US actually regained its leadership role and market share in that. And then that became kind of an international standard. And so I just want to show, you know, that was here Symantec in 1987, where we put industry, universities, and government together, led to the international roadmap. That became the Focus Center research program. And I mean, look, something else, a really important lesson here is you have to have high level involvement from top leaders. So the person from the university side that really, from the industry side that helped create Focus Center research program was Craig Barrett, you know, the founder of Intel. So Craig personally was very involved in this. And in fact, in the meeting, the executive board meeting where he was retiring from Intel, you know, his one missive to everybody on the board from the government and industry and the university was, okay, we put this together, don't screw it up now, right? That was, Craig was very clear on, we've got the right mixture here of support, guidance, and innovative ideas. Don't screw it up, people. And so, you know, that's what we have continued today. And actually this week, the US government put $50 billion behind a new semiconductor effort. And it's exactly in this model, right? This model has worked well and we're trying to continue it. Okay, so in the healthcare space, it's a very different problem, right? For the university, I mean, for semiconductors, the problem is how do we make the chips at lower cost with higher efficiency, right? And so that roadmap can be laid out. In healthcare, you have a different model, right? The care providers and the technology innovators are often a different set of people. And so what we really need here moving forward is the ability of the care providers to help define what needs to be done and the technology innovators to actually make the innovations that are necessary to achieve those goals. So what has happened instead is, you know, if you go back now and look at it, back in the late 1990s, you know, we had all this hype about artificial intelligence and how it's going to change the world. And you know what? It worked somewhat well. It had promise at that time. And this is an example from detecting breast anomalies, right? And so, or tissue that you need to be concerned with in a breast. And so we've reached the point now where the AI has actually caught up to the point where it can, you know, fulfill the promise that it had back then, and to the point where actually it can outperform clinicians, right? That's in a very narrow field. It's a specific thing, a routine thing that you're going to have to do all the time and get repeated consistency on. That's what a computer's good at. And now we've reached the point where that's actually achievable. And why I bring this up is because I think doing that, reaching that point where things like this are achievable from computers is the reason why we need to really accelerate it now. We need to put together the right people to guide and set what the challenges are, the technological companies to get behind that and provide what they're good at, right? And also we need the guidance from governments around, all right, where are the innovations going to be used, right? How are we going to make this better for everybody as opposed to a certain hospital chain or a certain company, right? We want to make this something where we improve for everyone. And so I think an important part of that, and a place where we have seen a lot of interesting innovation, is around digital surgery. And so, you know, that's something we're talking about here today, and we'll hear from Sergey Zuck about an interesting case of that with cancer detection. And so the one I wanted to call out to you is a little bit different, and that is for detecting aneurysms and then actually helping the surgeon decide what size stent they're going to put in and, you know, which one needs to be corrected when, you know, by looking at the morphology of the aneurysm, how it's changed over time, and actually helping the surgeon define which piece of hardware they want to put in. So what I want to come back to here is, in this example, the company who developed this capability, they take, you know, a scan of the person's arteries, and what they do is they look at changes in morphology over time, and then they help pick the right size device to put in so that the surgeon, when they go in there, they don't have the wrong size device and then have to keep the patient on the table for another half an hour while they throw away a device which costs several $1,000s and get another one made and then inserted, because there's a lot of risk there. And what's interesting here in this example was when the people developing this company put it together, they wanted to not only understand how to size it, but help the surgeon guide therapy, route plan how they're going to get in there and understand the fluid dynamics of the vessels. But when they presented that to the care providers after they had it all done, the doctors, the surgeons doing that said, look, I don't need any of that. All I really need you to tell me is which ones I need to operate on and what size device I need to put in there. So this company has now dropped actually all these other components and focused just on doing that. Let's understand the morphology. Let's understand what size device needs to go in. And that has been a successful business for them. And so they're doing quite well there. So that's really what I wanted to show. And I wanted to let you know that I think that we need to really look at here, what is the right innovation model? How do we put together the insights of the clinician with the technology innovations which now exist, and we need to really focus them? What's the roadmap for achieving these goals? And then we need the insight, the funding, the help to make it a common capability the government would provide. So, okay, I'd take any questions you have on the chat line. I'll answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Really interesting. You touched on a little bit at the end there. I think it's worth revisiting. And how does something go from being a really cool, innovative idea that's interesting and flashy to something that's actually clinically applied in real life? Who are the enablers of this? And as a country, what are the next steps in enabling that?
Right. So my opinion on that would be, I think the right people are the people on the ground providing care. So the clinicians, right? You really need to work with them and support them in the job they're doing. And so, from a technology point of view, and I think the aneurysm example is one where, okay, look, they could see from their point of view that, oh, you want to understand how the blood flows and where you might have additional problems downstream, all that kind of stuff. And it really didn't matter to the people on the ground who have to take care of these. And the people developing the technology did not, in this case, understand well what they were trying to solve. And so I think that that's what really makes the difference. I mean, this sounds very ordinary, but it's really essential that you understand, who am I trying to support with this, right? And you're trying to support the doctors who are doing the surgery in that case, and what is really their problems, and listen to them tell you their problems. But the challenge then actually goes back to the doctors as well. The doctors need not to solve the technology problem in many cases. That isn't helping. I don't need someone in the medical field to tell me how to solve the numerical problem or how to do the AI. That part I've got. Okay, what I need to understand is, what is the challenge they're trying to face? And then let me bring in the tools I have. So I think the most important thing there is exactly that. What is the problem I'm trying to solve, right? And if I'm just trying to develop technology, just go develop technology. Don't pretend you're trying to solve this problem, right? So when you go to solve the problem, take the broad view of, what's out there, what really addresses this best. And then once you have something working, don't be afraid to scale it up and fail, right? Set a good goal for yourself, which is, I'm not going to hurt somebody with this, but this will really tell me if this is going to work or not. And then go after that as quickly as possible. Because I think, especially with the project, you got to fail. You're going to fail, accept it, but just make sure you put the right challenge out there, because when you come back from that first failure, you'll probably do it much better the next time around.
It's really interesting. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, but maybe in the interest of time, Jeff, we might keep moving on. And thank you very much. If there's anything you can pop in later on again, maybe.
Yeah,
Now we're going to move from kind of big picture stuff to thinking of an example of an ecosystem in action, and looking at the DTIF project, AI in colorectal cancer detection. And for those of you that might not be aware, the DTIF, or Disruptive Technologies and Innovation Fund, which we'll hear a little bit more about later, is an Irish government-supported collaboration that includes industry, academics, and clinicians. And here to tell us a little bit more about that is Dr. Sergey Zuck from IBM Research Ireland. You're very welcome, Sergey.
Hi, Niall. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. I'm a technical lead of the IBM research team, which represents IBM in the digital surgery project, Future of Colorectal Cancer Diagnostics and Treatment. And I'll try to give a brief overview of some of the work we're doing with the partners from Mater Hospital and RCSI on perfusion quantification and with a specific focus on detection of colorectal cancer. This work, in fact, at least we think so, demonstrates, ecosystem in action from the initial ideation stage all the way up to the first version of working prototype, which works on real data, which also puts together concepts from AI, biophysics, surgery, and chemistry. And like Jeff mentioned, we try to put together right knowledge, bring in technological tools, and trying to solve a real challenge which occurs in clinics. Okay, so this was mentioned many times, and for example, it was noted by Leo Varadkar in his opening address that our project was one of the first projects to be awarded around 6 million euros from the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund. And like I said already, it's a collaborative effort with the digital surgery unit at Mater Hospital, chemistry at RCSI, and a digital pathology SME Dtif. Right, so let me try to take you on a quick journey through perfusion quantification, AI techniques, and tumor signatures from ideas to the prototype. So first of all, what we are trying to do, we're trying to quantify perfusion. Perfusion is a flow of blood through a biological tissue. And our hypothesis is that perfusion patterns can serve as a marker to identify malignant tumors. To confirm this hypothesis, we look at the structure of capillaries, as blood flow is largely defined by their geometry. So cancer tissue, it's well known, grows its own blood supply. This process is called angiogenesis. And the question we have, which actually comes from surgeons like Ronan Cahill, for example, how the abnormal structure of cancer capillaries will influence dynamic of the blood flow, and what kind of data can we use to quantify this influence? And so this is a kind of an answer for the second question, what kind of data can we use? The answer is fluorescence. There is a fluorescent dye that has been in clinical use for decades. It's called ICG. Once injected, it is distributed throughout the body via vascular system. And shortly after injection, an endoscopic camera starts shining light at the tissue of interest. And once ICG gets into the capillaries of the tissue, it starts absorbing the light first and then emits light back, but at a different wavelength. That emitted light is captured by NIR sensor of the camera, image on the right here, and sequence of such images, we call them NIR videos, can be used to visualize blood perfusion patterns. And so just to sum up, to verify our hypothesis that perfusion patterns can serve as a marker for malignant tumors, we look at blood perfusion visualized by fluorescence of ICG captured by NIR camera. And in this first step, what we are looking to do is we're looking to decide where is cancer? Is this cancer at all? In other words, we want to decide, we want to identify type of a tissue. Is it a cancerous tissue or not? Is it a benign growth or not? So those are really important questions, specifically in surgery, in colorectal surgery. So here is a typical example of an output of an endoscope. Large panel to the right shows the tissue inside the column, and on the left there is a black and white rectangle which displays NIR video. And just to recap, ICG is injected, the camera shines light at the tissue in the field of view, and once ICG gets into the blood, it starts absorbing and emitting light, and the latter emission is captured by NIR sensor of the camera, and which we call NIR video, and you can see this NIR video here. So basically this video is our input data. Given this video, we try to quantify perfusion, and based on the quantification results, we want to classify the tissue. Now, first step, which is kind of very important, is data extraction. This step is straightforward only if the camera and the tissue within the field of view do not move. For interoperative surgical use, the camera is handheld usually, and tissue contracts and expands, making acquisition very challenging, as you can see from this video. So we start off by selecting a number of so-called regions of interest, these boxes here, and then, for example, the white and blue boxes, each is selected at a certain location on the tissue, and what happens then is we collect NIR intensities within each box. NIR intensities are represented by brightness, pixel brightness within NIR image. And then we try to compensate motion of the camera and motion of the tissue in order to extract this pixel brightness and plot it over time as a time series of which basically represents dynamics of the fluorescence within each of these boxes, regions of interest. And you can see this time series coming up here on the right. So that's, shall we say, one of the most important steps in data extraction. If we don't get this right, we get a lot of noisy data, and then classification results based on noisy data are not very accurate. Now, let's say we got this right, and most of the time we do. What's next? We take the extracted time series of intensities and fit a biophysical model to estimate a number of explainable parameters. So you can see this model here, and parameters of these models serve as a set of features, which is then fed into a classifier. Now, the entire pipeline, we call it a 1D prototype, is depicted here. So we pick regions of interest, collect the brightness data, get fluorescence time series, use those fluorescence time series as an input for fitting parameters of a biophysical models, and the results of the fits you can see as a smooth curves right here. We pull out the parameters from each of the fitted model and send them to classifier, which then needs some supervised training. After that training, it is able to predict unseen, predict and classify, predict labels for unseen regions of interest. Now, important thing is that this pipeline can work nearly in real time, and because of the biophysical prior knowledge used in this model, we don't require thousands of video in training. For one thing, for another, parameters are explainable. Now, I'm gonna give you a quick demo of this pipeline. So it was screen recorded, you know, to prevent any demo effects like crashes and hangs. But this is how long it takes on a standard Mac laptop, and we didn't try to speed it up or anything like that. You'll just see this works nearly in real time. So this screen recording shows the whole process of data acquisition, feature extraction, and finally present the classification results. Because I'm not a surgeon, the medical expert, for example, like Ronan and his team, would annotate the endoscopic video, and you can see these annotations here. And red is malignant growth, potentially. So this is a suspicious region. And then in green, you can see parts of the tissue which a surgeon believes to be healthy. Now, we then select some regions of interest within these areas. By the way, the regions of interest can be seen as digital biopsy sites. And what happens next is these regions are selected, and we start the motion compensation in order to extract time series. Now, this is done on one of the actual videos provided by Ronan, and now you can see the whole procedure in action. What happens now is motion compensation in order to extract fluorescence time series representing each of the boxes here. And remember, this video is used only for motion compensation. This other one, the NIR video, is actually used for data extraction because pixel brightnesses here represent fluorescence intensities over time. The intensities are plotted on the right, also in real time. And once we have enough data, I think we are looking for the initial uptake to peak and then to see some of the decay or washout. We can stop. It's around 50 seconds in this case. And in the background, what happens is a fit. We find parameters of biophysical model. You can see the curves representing solution of that model. Data is, of course, a lot noisier compared to the model. So fit is done. It happens pretty quickly. And classifier comes up with it predicts the labels. So for this case, we have pathology results. And I can tell you that, for example, this suspicious region as well as this turn out to be cancer indeed. And this region is healthy. So the curves here represent our representations of the real data and serve as a set of biophysically explainable parameters for the classifier. Now, this result was presented to medical imaging community, and it was basically first confirmation of our hypothesis, namely that perfusion patterns can serve as a marker for malignant tumors. Was presented to one of the major medical imaging events last year, Mcguire, got a lot of positive feedback. Now, just to quickly summarize that result, on a relatively small cohort of 20 patients, we received 86% in terms of ROI accuracy, which shows how many times on average we predict the correct label for an ROI, right? Case accuracy is shows prediction per patient. In other words, if the patient has cancer or not, and here it's significantly better, 95%. Now, specificity is at 100%, and it shows the percentage of healthy patients which were correctly identified. Now, this was a specificity, so sensitivity shows the percentage of patients with cancer which were correctly identified, and here we're also at 100%. This is pretty encouraging result, even on a small cohort of patients. Now we're working to extend it to a larger cohort. This This result was also well received by surgical community. In fact, it made it to the cover of page of British Journal of Surgery and got a high altmetric score, which measures broad scientific impact of the paper, including mentions on social media platforms. Now, I want to stop here and mention that beyond colorectal cancer, there are other use cases for perfusion quantification. So, for example, it's reconstructive surgery, liver cancer, and here you have image from brain surgery. This is where brain is screened for AVM, arterious malformation, where arteries and veins are connected in abnormal disruptive ways, and the surgery needs to be done to correct for this. And yet another application, which I believe was mentioned at the beginning by Silvana, was fluorescence guided surgical robots, because in fact fluorescence can be used, you know, as a GPS or navigation inside human body to drive robot towards physiological information in the tissue, not just anatomy, but physiology as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sergey. I know I'm biased since I'm involved, but it's really, really cool stuff. So we'll move on now to the first of our two panel discussions. The panel consists of members of the DTIF consortium, the future of colorectal cancer diagnosis that we've been hearing a bit about from Sergey there. We'll give a few minutes for people to introduce themselves, and if people then in the audience have questions, please leave them below. So on the panel, we have Professor Ronan Cahill, surgeon from the Mater Hospital in UCD, Professor Donal O'Shea, head of chemistry, RCSI, Dr. Maureen Rafferty, Chief Operations Officer at Deciphex, and Dr. Paul McGangus, Senior Manager at IBM Research Ireland. So perhaps, Ronan, you might kick us off and tell us a little bit about your role in all of this.
Thanks very much, Niall. As surgeons, Niall, we both know that surgery is a really important part of healthcare, and that's Jeff and Savannah were talking about that too. It's still the only cure for many of our commonest cancers. It's a key role in the care of cardiovascular disease, trauma, and so many other conditions. But we know that it's difficult to do, and it risks complications. And it's really in all our interest to make it better, wherever and whenever it's done. Anyone who's been in an operating theatre, though, knows that we don't generally lack high-end technologies. The key aspect still is the surgical team and the decisions we make. And we need things really that improve our ability to rapidly assimilate all that complex information, personal to the specifics of each patient, with the interoperative findings, and build in our own experience and expertise serially within the time frame of the operation. Our current lack of intraoperative decision support, though, means that even our most advanced current robotic systems have been rather disappointing at achieving better outcomes. And as Silvana was showing, it'd be terrific to bring surgery now into the 21st century by adding to it capabilities that are increasingly standard in other industries. In Ireland, traditionally, surgical research has concentrated on basic science investigations in disease mechanisms, service process and audit type work, but not so much in developing surgery itself, its techniques and its technologies. So at UCD and the Mater, we've been working with like-minded partners to try to develop out this capability, including clinical trials to improve patient care. We'd really love to get Irish patients earlier access to the latest technologies and contribute ourselves to the development of next generation equipment. So one of the things we've been working on for some years is this area of fluorescence guidance surgery. And when I moved back from Dublin, following my work in IRCAD in Oxford, I was so excited to meet Donal O'Shea in RCSI, who's really done a superb work in developing agents that label structures and diseases for surgeons. And together we started applying some dynamic analysis to these fluorescent signals during surgery. And this really revealed some rather remarkable biological insights. But to make it useful, it really had to be teamed with higher end computer vision artificial methods. And Donal and I really had the great fortune to meet with Paul and his team in IBM Research, which kicked off the collaboration that includes the work that Sergey has just presented. Of course, though, the care of patients with cancer includes much more specialisms in a hospital than just surgeons and the operation. So in building out the scope of the project, it made sense to include pathology. And it's been so fantastic too to work with the great team at Dtif, who've really been doing some cool things in AI pathology analysis. So that's a bit about the genesis of the project, which you'll probably hear more from the other talkers.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Well, I think we'll go to Paul maybe next. Paul, you could tell us what's IBM doing in all of this.
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to work with lots of smart people. We have a very interesting remit in IBM's research division. As we keep saying to people, we're not a profit and loss part of the organization. Our job is more to apply our research and our technology skills to interesting problems. And when you get a convergence of such, practical and applied domain insight from Ronan and his team, Donald's understanding and knowledge of how dyes work and the work that he's doing on the sort of future generations of dyes. And then, Maureen and Donald, the other Donald O'Shea on the project. We have a lot of Donald O'Shea's. Maureen is, bringing such interesting leading edge AI techniques to image recognition and pathology. It's just a really interesting melting pot to not just try new ideas and develop new technologies, but to kind of reflect back on some of the points our second keynote, Jeff, made. It's to get through that virtuous circle of having people who are really focused on solving a practical problem. So, some people who can bring different skills to the table, and I think that's really important. We're not all doing the same thing, and we're not all trying. I'm definitely not a surgeon, and I think even on his best day, Ronan would probably not try and program an AI algorithm. And nor should he, because we have people there that are very smart at doing it, and then that fail fast mentality. Ronan is a great man for the so what approach to everything we do. We can bring him brightly colored things, but he just goes so what, and it's just such a fantastic privilege to be able to kind of get that insight really quickly from everybody on the team. So it's a really interesting position to be in, to be able to apply what you're kind of passionate about anyway, because you've spent years training up and building up your skills, but to get that immediate feedback, opportunity to access data and work on problems that people who really know what they're talking about tell you are relevant and important to solve.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. I think at the end we'll have time for a few more questions on you, Paul. We won't let you away that easily. Donald, an academic and a chemist, where do you fit in all of this?
Yeah, it's maybe a surprising addition to the team as a chemist, but we actually fit in right at the beginning with the fluorophore itself. I guess what we have to remember is that it's the light being emitted by the fluorophore that produces the image that's interpreted by the AI. So getting the fluorophore to do what we want is the key to actually making this a successful project. So what we do is we come up with new and innovative ways to use the existing clinically approved fluorophore ICG, which is part of the work that we're currently ongoing, but also looking beyond that, because we know there are limitations with ICG. We're able to go into the laboratory and make brand new fluorophores from scratch that have specific tailored properties, maybe so we can see specific tissue for its preservation during surgery, such as ureter, or really fancy ones whereby they switch themselves on only when they reach specific tissues, such as cancer. And the goal there is to try to get a good margin delineation around a tumor to guide the surgery in real time in the operating theater, obviously. So it's not just looking at images that were taken maybe hours or days previously. It happens all during the normal surgical workflow to guide the surgical team. But we do recognize and have right from the beginning is that humans interpreting images is very difficult, and the more complex the imagery, the more difficult it is to interpret, and that can lead to then obviously misinterpretation of images. So their AI plays a key role to bring all this very complex imagery together to reproduce it in a format that is actionable by the clinical team. So I guess that gives you a bit of a snapshot of how we contribute across different areas of the DTIF project.
Chemistry doesn't lie.
That's it. No, there's no hiding chemistry.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And finally, Maureen, we've spoken a lot about surgery. You might explain to us what Deciphex is, which is a slightly different angle, and also then maybe the role of an SME in all of this as well.
Yes, so we're a startup. We set up in 2017. Our focus is on streamlining pathology, so developing a digital pathology platform and embedding, artificial intelligence into that. So, in pathology, at the moment, a lot of it is still done the old way, down the microscope. So what we're trying to do is really make the pathologist more efficient. Our vision is to kind of screen out screen the samples in advance of the pathologist seeing that, and then we prioritize the slides that he sees. So we kind of put the cancers first on the list, and then as they go down by risk analysis, we do that. So this is our kind of a long-term vision. When we met up with the guys in IBM and UCD, they were working on colon. We were like, we're doing exactly the same. So we're developing algorithms for to identify the lesions in pathology in colon, and building out a full kind of platform to streamline the whole process. So in pathology, it has its own problems. So for example, there's a lot more patients with cancer, there's a lot more biomarkers that need to be read. So the pathologist workflow, standard workday, there's a lot more samples, a lot more volume coming their way. So our goal is to really trying to make them much more efficient in their day. So we're not really replacing them. And I heard that the surgeons have the same problem. They think they're going to get replaced. The pathologists have the same worries. So that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to collate all this information, give them actual quantitative data so that they can make the ultimate decision. So it's kind of a tool, a support tool to help them to kind of get through their workload as well.
And then as an SME in this kind of whole
so as an SME, as I said, we're relatively new. We're only around 4 years. So this was a really good project. The DTIF was kind of national funding for us. As Paul said, that we need the pathologists to help us design this. We are the software engineers. We can build the tech, but we need the pathologists to help us kind of know what we're looking at. Like we don't know when looking at a slide what that is. So we needed to be able to interact with the pathologists to get access to samples. So this project was really good in that it gave us access to the pathologists in the matter. So for us, it's been hugely beneficial for that. As a startup as well, this gave us the ability to do that. It's very difficult to kind of link up with as a small entity. So for us, it's been very advantageous.
Cool. And we have a question here, probably for you, Donal, I would say. How far or close are we from trialing out new upcoming fluorophores in clinical trial setting? For example, perioperative ureteric identification.
So we're getting closer to that position now. So we're just at the latter stage, collecting all the preclinical data to do a dose minimization study. And hopefully we'll have all that data in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then we have to address the regulatory agencies to ensure that everything is done safely from that point forward. So we're on track for what we said we could achieve in the DTIF, and very hopeful that the first trial in ureter identification will happen in the next 12 months or so.
Great. And maybe a general question for everyone. We're a fair bit into the project now. What's gone well? What hasn't gone well? Or what kind of would be the advice from an experienced panel in this now to anyone else that was thinking of heading along the same route?
I think the spirit of collaboration has gone very well. I think I've been constantly and pleasantly surprised by the openness of people to try ideas. I've been really impressed with the curiosity of everybody to try and see how far we can push the boundary of things. I think some of the things that haven't maybe gone so well, there's just so much to do. and you really do have to sometimes be ruthlessly focused. And there are so many interesting avenues we could go down. So one of the things, that I hope we will see over the next while is the sort of a next step along the road to getting these technologies into people's hands. And, I'll pass it over to Ronan maybe to comment, but, we are looking to scale out lots more data collection, lots more engagement from the surgical community, because we've already started open sourcing some of the tools that we've been developing, and we're encouraging people to sort of come and contribute and engage and be part of the ecosystem. And I would say, we've probably reached a growth point where we've done quite a lot of the preliminary work, in the digital surgery area at least, and Maureen can comment on the pathology area. But Sergey showed some examples of the kinds of publications we're getting at. We are getting noticed. And in order to get to the kind of next stage, we probably know that we need to expand the ecosystem a little bit from what we have right now as a base, without necessarily losing the focus that we're able to apply to the particular sets of problems that we're trying to solve. So, I'll pass it over to maybe somebody else to comment on that.
Yeah, Niall, I think working with people has been the best part of it, and it's really quite inspiring to be pushed to try and do more and do it better. It's been a terrifically synergistic collaboration, and we've needed that because there was a lot of work to do with sort of administrative aspects, contracts and agreements between the different institutions. The university and the hospital, for instance, it's not automatic that an agreement with one happens with the other. So you do really need to draw on a lot of people. And this is really people working with people rather than institutions working with institutions. But you do need to interact well with the GDPR officers at the hospital, the ethics committees. Patients, need and deserve an explanation as to how their data is being used. And yeah, it's been really quite big. Donald mentioned there, investigator-led clinical trials in new drugs, which there isn't a big footprint in Ireland for. But when you have the privilege of funding and such a talented group, there really is quite a lot of pressure then to deliver. You have no excuses. And we're 18 months into the project now, or maybe a little more, and it's great it's on track, but there is more to do. And it's a really, it's a really exciting research project, probably the most exciting one I've ever done, because this is tangible. It's happening already. The clinical aspects are happening already alongside the theoretical and experimental bits of it. So I guess it's de-risked in that sense as it's developing, but also it has all of the real world problems now of doing work in an operating room alongside, the busyness of the clinical environment. And but what's delightful then is to see various people not in the project as such, but clearly also engaged with the project. The theatre nurses are so fantastic, or the porters or the lab techs. It really is. That's your time machine, or your that's really what motivates you onwards. It's been it's great, but it's also a lot of work.
Absolutely, and you touched on it there. You're a fair bit into the project now. I suppose what can we expect in the next year, or on the home stretch, from anyone really, Maureen, or anyone would like to answer that?
Yeah, from our side, we've built our pathology platform, which is the first step, that will kind of host and manage the slides. The next step is our AI, so we're well advanced with that. We expect that at some point, probably in more like 22, that we will kind of be able to do some validation studies and get those, put them to the FDA for approval. So for us, this is fully aligned with our strategic plan for the company. So we see this as, driving our clinical side of our business. So it's fully aligned. So for us, it's having a huge impact.
Great. Paul, were you going to say something there?
No, I was just going to echo Maureen's comments. We're a research organization within IBM, so our interest is not immediately in commercialization, but more in developing the technologies, learning about the problem, and perhaps generating some IP. And so I would like to see over the next 18 months that we can extend the ecosystem in a number of directions. One I mentioned earlier was building out the sort of engagement for application of the technologies maybe to different problems, collection of more videos, more hospitals, more surgeons. And we're thinking about that very seriously, but also to begin to talk to people that might be interested in consuming some of the results of the work that we're doing, whether that be, you know, on the camera side or in other areas related to surgery, because I think, you know, the amount of material that's coming out now is quite impressive. We've made some significant progress now on a good corpus of work that kind of, you know, underlines our hypothesis and the science behind this. And I think the task for the remaining 18 months will be to kind of kick on now from, you know, we're much more confident now about the science and the medical application of what we're doing. Now we are going to try and make things stick and see how we can also get them into the hands of real surgeons and begin to have impact on patient outcomes and people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's going to be the fun bit, isn't it? Taking our baby out into the world and seeing how other people react to it. And we have a good advantage of a good clinical network where there's lots of people, Paul, who say, so what, back to you. It's not a, you know, this important stuff needs to be, you know, treated seriously like this. So yeah, we'll have to build on out that clinical network. The initial indications are very good. People are genuinely interested in it. In UCD, we've also built up the engineering side of it to look at optical devices, not necessarily devices that make pictures for people to interpret, but maybe devices that can generate back the signals that go into Sergey's algorithms. And, you know, that's a terribly interesting area, I think, for me, you know, because we're trying to get kind of, you know, useful information to the surgeon, not necessarily just a beautiful picture of it. And surgery is a time of high cognitive burden. So ways and means to support those systems are terribly interesting aspects. I can't wait to see Donald's dies. Hopefully, you know, to see them in a person would just be fantastic, Donald. Hopefully that's next year. And we'd love seeing the pathologists working with the AI and Maureen's. I mean, they've everything from a gorgeous new mouse to this lovely kind of annotation interface. So it's great to get, you know, it's lovely to see the front end. I know the back end is so important, but the front end is what we interact with, and it's great to see those sorts of things coming forward.
Yeah, and for that, we worked really closely with the pathologists to see exactly what they needed, how would we design it, what works well for them, what does the reporting look like. So all of this came from the pathologists. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. So it was a really good interaction there.
I guess too, we've probably, you know, learned a few things as we've been going through. We've been one of the first projects in the pipeline. And in fact, we were there on that opening day when Leo Varadkar announced the scheme in the Royal College of Surgeons. So not so long ago, but so long ago. And you know, we've been sort of learning how the process works. And as Ronan pointed out, it was quite labor intensive, certainly at the beginning. I think, you know, everybody who's been involved in things like the DTIF has probably learned a few things. And I know that, you know, the processes and so on are a little bit different now. And it has been a learning experience, not just for us as participants, but for Enterprise Ireland as the supervising body and for the department as the, you know, the original funders of the project. So I think, you know, it's been a kind of an interesting, sometimes hard work, sometimes a little bit tedious as we got stuck in processes 18 months to get to this point. But I think a lot has been learned, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where we get to in the next sort of 18 months, and then thinking about, you know, what's next after 18 months, because, you know, our DTIF will run its natural course, but there's so much more to do. There just really is so much more to do.
Yeah, so many learnings. But Niall, what's been great too is to see you and Jeffrey and other people coming into the project and making your own kind of advancements in it. You know, that the first year, I guess, was about ramping up what we were already doing, but it's terrific now to see the new offshoots. And yeah, it'd be really exciting to see what other projects can come up. We know we can do these agreements, and we know the institutions can, you know, we can set up the sort of the correct, appropriate pathways to do this type of work, and fantastic for other types of projects to be able to seed or take advantage of that. Now that really could be a terrific next step to the project, other types of groups and people working together to really try to, make, the patient care better. And that's really what clinicians are interested in, and that's where we love developing our own specialism into an area by doing new things. It moves us from competency to proficiency, and I mean, it's terrific to be involved in these type of projects. So we'd love other people to be able to springboard from that sort of precedent, I guess, Yeah,
well, I think as a trainee, this is certainly an area that hasn't really traditionally been offered in Irish surgery, something to do with kind of a very clinically based and certainly in the realm of digital surgery. So I think, from speaking to other people out there, that there is an appetite for this, and we can see from today with people that there's certainly the ideas going around. And if we could continue, and that's kind of the theme of the second half of today, is to how do we really keep pushing on from this, and not just this DTIF, but the ones that come on, and anyone else who may want to get involved with the non-traditional kind of science lab-based research areas. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of the first session, everyone. We now have a 30-minute break, kind of stretch the legs and get some food. Reminder, if anyone has questions, please stick them down below, and we either answer them in the chat or we can answer them live if we get around to it. There will be a recording of this, and there'll be material put up online for people afterwards. So we'll see you all back here at 1:30.